Alright lads, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at the A6e TRAM. This is the newest Rank 7 Premium available for the American tech tree. It is a 2-seat subsonic strike aircraft designed to take off and land on American aircraft carriers. But despite its slow speed and pretty bad engine performance, the A6e TRAM is armed with some very advanced weapon systems, including air-to-air missiles and ground strike options. Anyway, before we get into the nitty gritty, let's go over the basics. As I've already said, the A6e TRAM is a new Rank 7 Premium for the American tech tree. It also sits at battle rating 10.0 for arcade, realistic and simulator battles. To unlock the TRAM, you will have to buy it off the Gaijin store for the cost of $70. You get the aircraft, as well as some golden eagles and premium time. Being a premium, it's only going to set you back 10,000 silver lines to put this plane in your lineup, and for the expert and ace qualification, it's 1,510,000 silver lines for the expert qualification and 2,800 golden eagles for the ace qualification. So is the A6e worth the money? Well, it's got some advanced weaponry, but also suffers in terms of the actual performance of the plane itself. But if you'd like to know more about this plane, then stick around for the rest of the video. Alright lads, welcome back, and to kick things off we're going to start with the mobility and engine. And the A6e is powered by two non-afterburning Pratt & Whitney J52s, each producing 3,800 kilograms of thrust. While this sounds impressive on paper, it is just that, as the A6e TRAM only has a thrust to weight ratio or a rate of climb of 44 meters per second, and that's with clean wings. When carrying my preferred bomb load of 2 AIM-9Ls, a gun pod and 3 bombs, your rate of climb drops down to around 20 meters per second, giving it around the same climb rate as a World War II American carrier aircraft. There's not really any way to lie to you here boys, this is pretty terrible. Not only does it mean that you take a long time to actually take off in an air-realistic battle, but it also means that the plane struggles to retain its energy. The plane theoretically can reach up to a top speed of over 1,000 km per hour at sea level, but you will very rarely actually get up to this speed, especially if you are carrying a bomb load. If that was all, the TRAM would be workable in my opinion. But the A6e is also flies kind of like a boat, especially at lower speeds. But because this plane has such large wings, you'd expect it to be a pretty good turner. And at high speed, that is true. At high subsonic speeds, the TRAM does give a lot of planes a fighting chance against it. It's a very good turner, but at least you do have a chance to actually fight stuff. But if you get slow in this plane, then it's pretty much over for you. You can't really turn, and your large wings feel more like just extra drag than an actual benefit of the plane. I guess at this stage of the video it is important to remember that this is a carrier-based strike aircraft. It was never designed to be very agile, but compared to a lot of the other premiums, and especially to the other nations' Rank 7 premiums that are supersonic high-performance jets, and this is basically just the me of the world really. It's an overweight slob that doesn't really produce much. Wow, that was pretty dark even for one of my videos. Anyway, yeah, there's not much to say about the performance of the A6e itself. It feels very sluggish. It's okay at high speeds, but you're only going to get to those high speeds in a dive, and after you use all that energy, you're basically never going to be able to regain it. Luckily for you though, you aren't simply just missile bait. The aircraft isn't afterburning, so your airframe isn't that hot to begin with, and we can also carry along 60 countermeasures. But with the amount of AIM-9Ls being fired around at top tier, or 10.0 I guess for this plane, you will go through those countermeasures pretty quickly. I'd recommend taking 60 flares. You don't really encounter that many missiles that are semi-active radar homing, so there's not really much point in bringing along chaff. Speaking of the AIM-9Ls, let's now go on to the offensive capabilities of the TRAM. Starting with the pilot, we can see that we do have a CCIP, or constantly calculated impact point, for our cannons, rockets and bombs. The A6e also has a built-in targeting pod located just under the nose of the aircraft. This has some pretty bad limitations, but we'll cover that when we get to the laser-guided bombs. I mentioned that we had a CCIP for our cannons, but the A6e doesn't actually have any internal weaponry. The only cannons can be carried as a pod on one of the 5 hardpoints. This weapon pod is the 20mm Mark 11 Mod 5. with 750 rounds of ammunition. I believe it is the same gun pod found on the American F4J. This is nowhere near as good as the 20mm M61 Vulcan found on most other American planes, but in my opinion it is still pretty lethal. It hits pretty hard against both enemy players as well as ground targets. But that being said, I would much rather have the M61. Anyway, being an American plane, you can bet your ass that it's full of pretty useless weapons. The US Navy had more freedom that they knew what to do with and just gave this thing everything they could possibly think of. Starting off with the FA-AR Mighty Mouse rockets, these are of World War II vintage, or pretty much I believe. They travel pretty fast at 701 meters per second, but the TNT warhead is pretty bad to be honest, only 1.17 kilos of TNT. So while you do have 290mm of penetration, you just don't really have that post-pen damage to do a lot of work. But you do have a CCIP for rockets, so they can fire them pretty accurately. We then also have the Zuni Mark 32s. These are much larger, as I'm sure you all know. They've been found on pretty much every American fast jet since around battle rating 8.7. They have a higher explosive warhead containing 8.9 kilos of TNT, giving them pretty good post-pen damage as well as 457mm of penetration. The downside of the Zunis is the size though. They are much larger than the Mighty Mouse, so you can only carry 4 per pod, whereas the Zunis, I think you can carry around 20 or 19 or something like that. We can then carry napalm, which I hear is pretty good for destroying enemy bases now, but it's not really that useful. You know, napalm is a mainly anti-infantry weapon and this isn't enlisted, but maybe it can be useful in the future, and I guess it is nice to have in general. We can also carry a selection of bombs. First we have the 250 pounders, which will destroy any vehicle within a radius of 5 meters. We also have the 500 pounders, which will destroy any vehicle within a radius of 7 meters. We also have the 1000 pounders, which will destroy any vehicle within a radius of 11 meters. And finally, we can carry a 2000 pounder, which will destroy any vehicle within a radius of 18 meters. That covers all of the dumb bombs, but we also have some laser guided munitions, or PGMs. Precision guided munitions. But first we have the GBU-12 or the Paveway 2. This is the lightest precision guided weapon that we can carry, with a warhead of 118 kilos of TNT. Despite being relatively small in size, this is still more than enough to kill any main battle tank if you get a direct impact. So despite what you might have been told, I'm here to tell you gamers, size doesn't always matter. Anyway, we can then take along the GBU-16s. These have around 150 kilos more of TNT, having a TNT equivalent of 272 kilos of TNT. Again, while it is nice to carry the larger bombs, you don't really need them. If you get a direct impact with the smaller bombs, they are still going to kill them. And with the GBU-12s, you can carry 2 bombs on 1 hardpoint, whereas for the GBU-16 and the next bomb, we can only carry 1 per hardpoint. Speaking of which, we have the GBU-10. This is a much larger bomb. I don't know why the Americans name things counter-predictively. Like the GBU-10 is the biggest, but the 12 is smaller. Anyway, the GBU-10 can carry 578 kilos of TNT, making it a massive weapon. I believe this is just a 2,000 pound bomb with a guidance kit strapped onto it. Or it acts kind of like that way. It's a very powerful bomb, but again, you don't really need all that firepower in one package. I do usually take a GBU-10 into battle and then some smaller GBU-12s as well. These GBUs sound very impressive, especially considering that the A6E has 5 hardpoints, allowing you in theory to take up to 10 precision guided bombs into a battle. But remember that I said there was an issue with the targeting pod? But the targeting pod of the A6C has pretty bad gimbal limits to the rear of the aircraft. This means unlike aircraft like the Tornado or the Harrier, you can't really drop a bomb and fly over a target and have the targeting pod remain tracking. The tracking pod will just lose track as soon as you overfly the target, which means you have to launch a weapon in a shallow dive, which usually means you are getting very low to the battlefield, well within the range of enemy air defense systems, or you have to kind of drop your bomb and then turn to the side. Either way is a little bit awkward, to be honest. I don't know if this is a glitch. I think it is. I think the targeting pod should be able to have a pretty good coverage behind the aircraft as well, so this may change in the future. But for people who are trying to use this as a catcher, it can be a little frustrating, as if you overfly a target, the tracker just will lose track, which, as you can imagine, is not good for your accuracy. But anyway, we have one final weapon to talk about, and that is the AIM-9L. The AIM-9L is pretty famous at well, not famous, but you know what I mean, pretty infamous at top tier, top tier as well, I guess, but especially around battle rating 10.0 with the A10 premium cancer. The AIM-9L, as I'm sure you're all aware, is an all-aspect missile, which basically means half the planes that fight against it have no countermeasures at all. So it's basically just, there's nothing they can do to counter it. Working as intended, as I'm sure the Gaijin devs imagined. Anyway, being an all-aspect missile, you can only really get it off you if you countermeasure it with flares, or you're in like a bloody 0 or something and you can outturn it. But good luck outturning it, considering this missile can pull 30 Gs of overload. It also has a pretty long burn time. It's not as long range as you'd think it would be, because the A6E is subsonic and quite slow at that. It's not like an F-16 where you can launch this thing at Mach 1.5 and extend its range by 50% or so. So you're probably not going to be getting those 3km shots or 4km shots, especially in all aspect. But the AIM-9L certainly is a very strong weapon. In an realistic battle, I usually take along 3 AIM-9Ls as well as a gun pod, so 3 missiles in a gun. And in ground realistic battles, I usually take out 1 AIM-9L, a gun pod, and then 3 precision guided bombs. While you could full hog it and take 5 of the laser guided bombs out into a ground battle, I think it's better to have a missile and a gun just for self-protection. I tried taking out all the PGMs at once, and you very rarely actually manage to drop 5 times. Usually either die or get frustrated before you manage to complete 5 bomb runs. So it is worth just bringing along a missile and a gun just for some self-defense options. There's also a lot of helicopters around battle rating 10.0, and they're quite hard to take out with a missile, so a gun is probably your best bet there as well. But anyway, is the A6E TRAM worth $70? No, it's not. It's got terrible performance in terms of just actual kinematics. It's got a pretty decent bomb load, sure, but its tracking system is bugged, as I've mentioned now, which kind of ruins it. Planes like the Tornado, the Jaguar, the Harrier, they are much better with an actual outboard targeting pod and a hardpoint. Again, Gaijin could patch that literally tomorrow or the second this video goes live, but because of that, it is a little bit frustrating to use as a ground striker. In my opinion, the only redeeming factor of this plane is the AIM-9Ls. Kind of like the A-10, it does rely just on its missiles. Once those missiles have been fired, the plane is pretty dead in the water, especially in terms of its performance. It is, as I've said, subsonic. It seizes up at high speeds. Granted, it can turn well at high speeds, but if you go a few kilometers per hour faster, it just locks up as well, so it's very frustrating to fly. But maybe in the future this thing goes on half price, maybe they fix the targeting pod. Sure, maybe it's worth it then at around $40. But at $70, no. Not even, like most of the most of the supersonic premiums like the MiG-23, MiG-23 ML, that's not even worth $70. J7D, it's not worth it. So this thing definitely isn't. It's a kind of nice cash jet, but the American tree, pretty much every plane can be multi-stroke, so why pay $70 when you can just use literally anything else? Anyway, lads, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm not really wrote a script, trying to be a little bit more hip. Not hip, no one actually says hip anymore. I'm only 26 and I've turned into the hello fellow gamers that I always hated. Anyway, lads, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider leaving a like and subscribe. And be sure to let me know down below in the comments what you guys want to see next. It really just helped me out in the algorithm and generally to grow the channel. Anyway, boys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next review. As always, a big thank you to my YouTube members and everyone who keeps returning to watch this shit.